A successful financier returned from London to marry the daughter of an oligarch. He sent an invitation to his ex, who did not accept his decision to leave 6 years ago. But when she entered the hall, all the guests gasped, and the groom turned pale with shock. Dear friends, before we continue, right from where you are listening to us, don't forget to like, subscribe to, channel, and share your opinion about the story in the comments. Enjoy listening. An amazing evening, isn't it? The voice of a socialite sounded somewhere behind him. Maxim did not answer. His gaze slid over the panorama of evening Moscow. That opened from the windows of the suite of the Metropole Hotel. The city stretched out before him, huge, majestic, and completely indifferent to the fate of people. Just like he himself has been indifferent for the last 6 years. Hand with a glass of Yining Dump, froze halfway. Champagne, almost 20,000 per bottle, seemed tasteless. He suddenly clearly remembered the taste of cheap semi-sweet that he and Zarina drank on the roof of the Moscow State University dormitory. The taste of happiness. The phone in his pocket vibrated, breaking the stupor. Maxim took it out and glanced at the screen. 247 likes in 2 minutes. Dog Victoria underlining Larina and dog. M. Belov announced their engagement. His finger froze over the screen. In the reflection of the glass, he saw himself. Impeccable suit from Tomford, a sweaty courtier, a hairstyle with a slight gray on the temples, which he did not paint over now, finding that it was. Gives it solidity. A model groom, an exemplary banker, an exemplary emptiness. Voices were heard behind his back. Moscow elite, the intonations of people who are familiar to the point of nausea, discussing yachts, real estate, and the latest political. Gossip. Somewhere in this crowd was his fiancée Victoria Larina, the daughter of an oligarch, a ticket to high society, the final chord of his many years of success. But instead of her face, he saw another, thin one, with Mendel-shaped brown eyes, freckles on the bridge of her nose, and a smile that made my heart stop. Zarina, the only woman who loved him not for who he became, but for who he could be. You resemble a goldfish in a crystal aquarium. Dennis materialized nearby, as always inopportune and as always timely. A school friend, the only one who remained from the time when Maxim was just a talented boy with outskirts and not a financial genius with apartments in London. Small talk is tiring. Dennis took a glass from a passing tray and took a sip. Maybe we should go out on the terrace. At least you can breathe there without the aromas of French perfume. The terrace greeted them with a cool May air below. The theater square was noisy, but here, 6 stories above the earth, the city sounded muffled, like background music in the expensive restaurant. You know, Denise leaned on the opera. I look at you and think you're happy or just successful. Because, just imagine, these are different things. Maxim grinned. The champagne in the glass sparkled under the light of the street lamps. Philosophizing? At school, you were a pragmatist, and you were a romantic who dreamed of a just world. Remember? Dennis looked at him. Eyes. What happened to us, Max? Silence. Somewhere in the distance, a car horn hummed. I've been checking her social networks for 6 years, Maxim suddenly said, turning away. Every week, sometimes more often. Dennis froze with a glass to his lips. Zarina? Yes. The word hung between them. It is not often. He updates the pages, mainly photographs of translations, books, sometimes Moscow. She never left the city. And, what now? Why are you telling me this? Maxim squeezed the railing to his white knuckles, feeling something dark rise inside, held back for a long time. I invited her to the wedding. Dennis dropped his glass. The crystal shattered on the tiles of the terrace, scattered into thousands. Shrapnel, as once his life with Zarina had scattered. You what? Dennis looked at him as if he were crazy. What for? Maxim, this is your former student love, which you left for the sake of your career. Is there not enough drama in your life? I want her to see. Maxim's voice has become harsh, so that she can see what I got, what I achieved, that the sacrifice was worth the result. Victim. Dennis shook his head. Do you call her that? Maxim, 6 years have passed. She has had a different life for a long time, and you have another one. Life. You don't understand, Maxim. Turned away. A different picture appeared before my eyes. Sparrow Hills. Summer 2013. He and Zarina are sitting on a blanket. The sunset paints everything around in golden tones. Her hair smells like flowers. They are young, in love, full of plans. You know. What do I want most? She asks, leaning back on his shoulder. House with an apple orchard. To make children run around. barefoot on the grass, plucking apples right from the branches, and we would sit on the veranda and look at them. Children. He smiles, kissing her temple. How many? 2. A boy and a girl. Certainly, he promises, we will have all this and more. They are so confident in their future, so absolutely unconditionally confident. The phone in his pocket vibrated, pulling out of the memories. Message. Maxim took out his mobile and froze. A notification from a subscriber listed in contacts lit up on the screen, just like Z. Thank you for the invitation. I'll come. With. All the air seemed to have escaped from his lungs. He felt the ground slip from under his feet. For the first time in many years, he was losing control of the situation. You look like a ghost saw it, Dennis remarked. A what? Happened? Maxim silently handed him the phone. Dennis read it and whistled. Congratulations! Have you summoned the ghost of the past? And he answered the call. Now let's find out. Maxim put the phone away and fired a volley. I finished my champagne. Was it all worth it? A strange feeling rose inside him. A mixture of fear, anticipation, and hope. As if he is 22 again, and all the most important things in life are just beginning or ending. The rays of the setting sun penetrated through the tulle curtains, painting the small kitchen in warm colors. Zarina sat behind. Table turning over the pages of the translation of the novel by an American writer, but his eyes returned again and again to the invitation. Lying aside. Heavy cream paper with ribbons, gold calligraphy, the coat of arms of the Arkhangelskaya Hotel, everything screamed about. Luxury and status. For that he left, she grinned bitterly, touching the embossed letters with her fingers. 6 years, 6 long years, without a single message, without a call, without trying to find out how she is. And suddenly the invitation to the wedding is like a stone from the heaven. In a small apartment on Chisty Prudi, it was quiet and cozy. On the refrigerator there are dozens of children's drawings, attached with magnets. Each has 3 figures, a mother, a boy, a girl. Their family is small, but a real family. No. Illusions, no falsehood. From the table, an unfinished translation of a contract for an oil company looked at her. Good order. Thanks to which they will be able to go to Kazan in the summer to visit their grandmother. Plus, there will be enough for a new laptop to work with. Translations. Part-time jobs, endless savings, her everyday life all these years. What does he care about us now? Why grow? Past, she thought, but something inside her still trembled. Pride fought the desire to show him the children, his children, children whose existence he did not have. Idea. Mom, what is it? A thin child's voice made her shudder. In the doorway stood Dina, a small copy of Zarina herself, the same Mendel-shaped brown eyes, the same naughty, chestnut curls. Artyom looked over his sister's shoulder. Curiosity shone in his familiar gray eyes. This invitation to the holiday. Zarina quickly put the card in the folder with translations. There's going to be a cake, businesslike. Artyom asked, squeezing past his sister. In his incomplete 6 he already showed character, serious, collected, decisive. Quite so. I don't know, baby. I may have to go there for work. She patted his dark hair, involuntarily touching the stubborn pole, exactly the same as Maxim's. Artyom suddenly did something unexpected. He walked over to the kitchen cabinet, stood on tiptoe, reached for the top shelf, and pulled out something, hidden behind a stack of kitchen towels. Mom, is that him? Yes. The boy handed her an old frayed photograph, which would be at the holiday. Zarina's breath caught in her throat. How did he know? How did you find it? A photograph that she has cherished and hidden all these years. She is with Maxim against the background of Moscow State University, happy, in love, unaware of what awaits them. Where did you find it? That was all she could squeeze out. You will. I looked at her when I thought we were sleeping, Artyom replied simply. I woke up at night and saw. Dina came closer curiously examining the picture. Is that my dad? She asked quietly. Alex says everyone has dads, even if they are far away. Zarina felt a lump in her throat. What to answer? Everything that came to mind seemed wrong. I'll tell you later. Okay, she carefully took the photo. Now it's time for dinner. Go wash your hands. The children obediently went to the bathroom, but she saw Artyom's face. He understood everything. He always had this amazing sense of truth. He never did not believe in fairy tales about the stork. When she was alone, another picture suddenly popped up before her eyes. Sheremetyev. International Terminal, October 2013. It's only for a year or two, Zarina, Maxim assures, tightly squeezing her hands. Internship, experience, connections. Then I'll come back and we'll live differently. We will have everything. She nods, and in her bag, inner pocket test with 2 stripes, 6 weeks, she found out yesterday and did not dare to say it yet. I will be. To come at the first opportunity, he continues, but she can already see that he is all there in London. A fire burns in his eyes, ambitions, thirst for success, desire to escape. If I say, there will be an ezel. Sooner or later he will begin to hate both me and the child, flashes through his head. Maxim Belov, passenger of the Moscow-London flight. Please go to boarding. They are carried around the hall. I have to go. He kisses her, pulls away. Did you want to say something? She opens her mouth, but the words don't go. His future is in front of his eyes, a brilliant future that she can destroy with one phrase. No matter. Go, she says. Finally, the last kiss. She remembers everything. Its smell, the texture of the skin under her fingers, the pulse beating on his neck as if he knew he would never feel it again. He leaves without looking back. She stands with her palms pressed to her stomach where a new life is growing. The memory dissipated. The phone on the table rang, pulling Zarina out of the abyss of the past. The number was unfamiliar, but she recognized the voice immediately. Hello, Zarina. This is Elena Belova, Maxim's mother, unexpectedly. Hello, Elena Sergeyevna, she answered, straightening up as if her interlocutor could see her. Maxim invited you to the wedding, without preamble, the woman said. Come? Why grow the past? Zarina mechanically began to sort through the papers on the table. It was a long time ago. And the children? Quietly, Elena asked. They deserve to know their father. Zarina froze. Are you going to take it? Elena's voice was bitter. I saw you in the park a year ago. The boy is a copy of Maxim in childhood, and the girl, beautiful children. He doesn't know about them, right? No. One short word that hid years of loneliness, struggle, and quiet motherly courage. After the conversation with Elena, Zarina felt squeezed out, but she had another call ahead of her. She dialed. Room in Kazan. Abi salam, she said when she heard her grandmother's native voice. Salam kizim, Gulnara replied. Tavishin Barchilgan. Not Boldi. What happened? You've got an anxious voice. Zarina briefly spoke about the invitation. Gulnara was silent for a long time. Kurkuli, Kesh, Botin, Gomerni, Yaner, Astinda, Yashi, the old woman finally said. A cowardly person all his life, under thee, lives by rain. I'm not afraid, Abby. I just don't want pain, Zarina objected. Cousin Akragenya Tugel wisely remarked Gulnara. Open your eyes, not your heart. Look at it today, not yesterday's. People change dramatically, sometimes for the better. And if not, then at least you will know the truth. Kids deserve it, and so do you. Late in the evening, Zarina stood in the doorway of the nursery watching the sleeping twins. Artyom hugged a teddy bear, which she gave him for his last birthday. Dine, spread out like a star, the blanket is knocked down at her feet. She remembered maternity hospital number 4. A hot day in June 2014. How an elderly midwife with kind eyes delivered the baby. How she clenched her teeth in pain, refusing anesthesia. How she held Artem in her arms, first for 23 hours 47 minutes, then Dina for 23 hours 58 minutes. Both were born on the same day, as they once dreamed with Maxim. She was alone then, and was left alone. Zarina took out her phone and typed a message into a small boutique, where she sometimes bought things. You need a dress up to 15. Something elegant for a wedding? She sent a message and took an old photo out of her pocket. Maxim looked from her with young, hopeful eyes. I'll go for the sake of the children, she whispered. Let them know the truth. Let them know who their father is. Zarina ran her finger over Maxim's face in the photo. Let's see what you've become. A yellow Solaris with the car-sharing logo stopped at the gates of the Arkhangelskaya estate. Zarina looked around at the line of Rolls-Royces, Bentleys, and Maybachs lined the driveway. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the trembling in her hands. Mom, we've arrived. Dina fidgeted in the back seat, pressing against the, Your favorite doll? Yes, baby. Zarina pulled away a simple linen ivory dress. The best that I managed to find for 15,000. Just be quiet, okay? Artyom was already clinging to the window, looking at the gardens spread out in front of them, and colonnade! Like in a fairy tale, he whispered admiringly. Princesses live here. Zarina smiled sadly, catching his reflection in the rearview mirror. Carefully styled hair, discreet makeup. She looked dignified, but next to the wedding guests, she would still be like a dull pebble among the diamonds from which we were discharged long ago, she said quietly, more to herself than to herself. Son, getting out of the car, Zarina, firmly took the children by the hands. A couple in a tuxedo and evening dress walked by. A woman in a huge feathered hat looked at them appraisingly, from modest Serena shoes to simple costumes of twins. The air rang from a string quartet playing something classical. White armchairs, decorated with flowers and ribbons, lined up in perfect rows in the main clearing. Aside girls with selfies were taken with perfect hairstyles, demonstrating the hashtag of the wedding. They're like dolls, Dina whispered, looking at the guests. Clever, Zarina nodded. Remember, not all that glitters is gold. Is Dad here? Artyom suddenly asked, and Zarina froze. They've been talking about it all week. She explained to the children that Maxim, their father, but did not have time to tell more about him. And what can I say about a person whom I haven't seen for 6 years? Zarina, it can't be. She turned around and met Dennis's eyes. The same sly look, the same good-natured, wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, but now in an expensive suit and with a watch that costs like her apartment. Hello, Dennis. She smiled, feeling a strange relief from meeting a familiar face. Dennis's gaze fell on the children. He froze, looking at Artyom, and Zarina saw how his pupils dilated. A small copy of Maxim, the same vihor on the top of his head, the same, gray eyes, the same jawline. Are you them? He looked at Zarina, unable to finish his sentence. Yes, just, she answered. Do they know him? Asked Dennis hoarsely. He'll find out in 5 minutes. Zarina proudly raised her head. Artyom looked at Dennis curiously. Are you a friend of the bridegroom? He asked with unchildish seriousness. Where is he? Dennis. He ran his hand over his face, as if trying to wipe away the shock. Then he pulled himself together. Come, I'll take you to him. They walked through the garden past the whispering guests. Zarina felt the eyes on her, curious, perplexed, contemptuous. She didn't care. Now only the children and the upcoming meeting were important. Wait here at the fountain. Denise pointed to a marble bowl with dancing dolphins. I'll warn him. In a small room of the manor wing, Maxim stood in front of a mirror, mechanically adjusting his impeccably tied tie. His gaze was blank. His thoughts were somewhere far away, perhaps in the past, which was finally going to be. Barry. Cordier's punks glittered in the cuffs of his snow-white shirt. Everything is perfect. That's right. Everything is dead. The door crashed open. Denise flew into the room, pale, with widened eyes. She. Here, he blurted out. Not alone. Maxim turned around. Zarin, of course, I invited. With children, he cut him off. Dennis, your children. The world froze for a second, and then shattered on a fragment. Maxim rushed to the door, not understanding what he was doing, obeying a primitive instinct. He needed to see, to make sure, to understand. He sprang out into the street, onto the sunlit area in front of the manor, looking around feverishly, and suddenly he saw her, Zarina, standing by the fountain. The sun played in her dark hair, turning it to copper. The same proud posture, the same slightly raised chin. And then he saw the children. The boy turned around first, and Maxim seemed to look into the mirror of his childhood. Same gray eyes, same. A stubborn whirlwind on the top of his head, the same tilt of his head. The girl was hiding behind her mother, but he saw Zarina's eyes, her cheekbones, her lips. 6 years ago, mathematics did not require proof. A hot wave passed through my body, my knees buckled, and nausea came to my throat. Shock, recognition, pain, shame, guilt. A tsunami of feelings covered our heads, depriving them of the ability to breathe, think, and exist. He walked towards them, not feeling. Legs under you. Time stretched and squeezed at the same time. Every step is like a kilometer. Every second is like an epoch. The boy noticed it first. He stepped forward, protecting his mother and sister, the instinct of the protector, which Maxim recognized. His own. I'm Artyom, boy. He stretched out his hand for a handshake, like an adult. Are you a fiancé? Maxim knelt down, finding himself face to face with his son. Son. That word tore something inside her, flooded hot. He shook a small hand, feeling his fingers tremble. Yes, my voice refused to obey. Yes. The girl hesitantly peeked out from behind her mother. And I'm Dina, she said quietly, not daring to come closer. Zarina put her hands on the children's shoulders with a protective gesture that he immediately. I got it. They're yours, she said softly, looking him straight in the eye. Born on June 15th, 2014. Artyom at 2,347 minutes, Dina at 23 minutes. Why? Maxim was only able to squeeze out. Why didn't she tell me? Their views. They clashed as they once did when they could talk for hours without words. You've already gone inside, she replied bitterly. Even before the airport. Maxim did not notice that people began to gather around them. The photographer clicked the camera. The whispers grew like the approaching sea surf. And at that moment, there appeared in the clearing Victoria. The white dress rustled on the grass. Photo was developing in a light breeze. Her face shone with happiness until she did not see the groom kneeling in front of an unfamiliar woman with children. What is going on? Her voice cut through the sudden silence. Maxim slowly rose to his feet. He saw his fiancée, but he could not take his eyes off the children. His children. It's him, cleared his throat. These are my children. Time has stopped. There was absolute vacuum silence. Even the birds seemed to fall silent. Heavy footsteps rang out in the emptiness. Igor Larin, Father Victoria, pushing the guests apart. I walked to the center of events, growing black before my eyes. What kind of circus have you arranged? He growled, finding himself nearby. Who is this? Woman? What kind of trick? His gaze shifted to Zarina, and the children narrowed. A swindler, he spat out. What coincidence will show up on the wedding day? We will require a DNA test. I will not allow it. Careful! Maxim's voice made everyone shudder. Don't you dare talk like that about the mother of my children. Zarina straightened up, gaining that inner strength that helped her. To survive all these years, I am Zarina Khalitova, she said clearly. Translator, single mother, 6 years old. I deserve respect, even if you don't like it. Victoria shifted her gaze. From Maxim to the children, from the children to Zarina, a storm was brewing in her eyes. Did you know? She asked, her voice ringing with steel. Did you know all this time? No, Maxim shook his head. I swear, I only found out now. Artyom carefully pulled Maxim by the sleeve. Uncle, why is Auntie screaming? He asked with childlike spontaneity. Uncle, this word passed through Maxim's heart like a knife. Not Dad, Uncle. He knelt down, finding himself on one. Level with children. I'm not an uncle, he said, looking into the eyes first of Artyom, then of Dina. I'm your dad. Artyom frowned. Eyebrows. In the same way Maxim himself frowned in childhood when he did not understand something. Where have you been before? The boy asked, and the question struck with a whip. Dina suddenly stretched out her hand and touched his cheek. You're crying, she said in surprise. Maxim did not notice how tears rolled down his face. He hadn't cried since he was a child, since his father left, leaving him and his mother in debt. Victoria took a step back, her face turned into a cold mask. The wedding is cancelled. She tore off photo with a sharp movement. It's over. Igor Larin grabbed Maxim by the shoulder. I'll destroy your fund, whispered. You will regret this day. Maxim gently freed himself and stood next to Zarina and the children. Something has changed in his face. The usual mask of a successful financier has disappeared. Real features appeared. Today, I found out that I have children, he said calmly. It's more important than any money. He turned to Zarina and the children. If you'll let me, I want to get to know you, if not too much. It's too late. Dinarubka smiled and took his hand. Artyom was still frowning, but nodded. Zarina looked at the man she once loved more than life, the one with whom she dreamed of growing old, the one who left without looking back, and the person who was now kneeling in front of their children, not caring about the wedding, money, and reputation. At that moment, she saw what she wanted to see 6 years ago, her father, their children. The key turned in the lock with the usual grinding sound. Zarina pushed the door open, letting the children go ahead. Maxim. He froze on the threshold as if stepping over it meant crossing the invisible border of the worlds. Come in, she nodded to him, hiding her awkwardness. Cramped, of course. 42 square meters. Kitchen, living room, children's bedroom, Zarina's tiny room. The whole apartment would fit in the living room of his London apartment. Maxim entered, looking around. In his briny suit with a watch worth as much as a used car, he seemed ridiculous here, alien, like a deep-sea fish washed ashore. The air of the apartment smelled of cinnamon, freshly brewed tea, children's books. He smelled of life, real, without embellishment, without falsehood. On the refrigerator, there are dozens of children's drawings attached, magnets, stacks of books and textbooks on the shabby sofa. Outside the window, like a blessing, the branches of the old apple trees almost touching the glass. "You're comfortable," Maxim said, realizing how clumsy the compliment seemed. Dina was already enthusiastically showing her toys laid out on the carpet. Artyom stood a little to the side, watching his father, with the alertness of a wild animal. "Are you all alone?" Maxim asked quietly. When Zarina was passing by, they put, "Kettle." She turned, and something sharp and quick as a knife blade flashed in her eyes. Was there a choice? She answered simply, and continued to make tea. Maxim lowered his head. There were no answers. After dinner, simple but delicious vegetable casserole with cheese, Zarina sent the children to wash their faces. They returned, in pajamas with wet hair and clean faces. Artyom approached Maxim, examining him with agonizing seriousness. "Are you really our dad?" he asked, clinging to the armrest of the chair where Maxim was sitting. The silence rang with tension. Maxim felt a lump roll up to his throat. He nodded, not trusting his voice. "Yes," he said at last. I really regret that I was not there all this time." Dina, who was standing a little farther away, came closer, tugging at the hem of the nightgown. "Will you live with us?" she asked with childlike spontaneity. Zarina, who was clearing the table, froze with plates in her hands. "It's hard, baby," she said quickly. "We are with Dad. There is a lot to discuss." Maxim caught her gaze, grateful for calling him the father of the children. "Why didn't you come earlier?" Maxim opened his mouth and closed it. "How do you explain to a 5-year-old that his father fled poverty and fear? How? Justify yourself when there are no excuses?" "I didn't know you existed," he replied at last. "And this is my biggest error." Zarina went to the bookcase and took out a tattered volume. "It's time to sleep," she said softly. Maybe she handed the book to Maxim. "Do you read it to them?" "The Little Prince and the Princery, their favorite book in their university years." "I am with joy." The children sat on the sofa on either side of it. It's a strange feeling, as if it had always been like this, as if they had been waiting for this moment all their short lives. Adults never understand anything on their own, and it is very tiring for children to endlessly explain and explain everything to them, he began, and his voice trembled treacherously. He read, feeling the warmth of small bodies pressing against him on both sides. "I read about the prince who left his rose, about traveling between the stars, about how painful it is to lose those you love." 2. At the end of the chapter, Dina was already asleep, curled up in a ball. Artyom struggled with sleep, but his eyelids were getting heavier. "Will you continue tomorrow?" he asked sleepily. Maxim looked at Zarina, looking for an answer. She helped put the children to bed in their room, tucked up the blanket, kissed her on the forehead. When they returned to the kitchen, the silence became palpable, thick as honey. "Why didn't you tell me?" Finally he asked, as they sat across from each other at a small table with mugs of cold tea at the airport. Then Zarina looked somewhere past him, through the window, where the branches of the apple tree drew patterns against the evening sky. "I saw how." "You're rushing away," she said quietly. In your eyes there was a hunger for another life, for success, for everything that you could not give. With our poverty, I could not destroy your dream. You'd give me a real purpose. He slammed his fist on the table and the cups jumped, meaning, why is it worth achieving success? You would have stayed out of a sense of duty, rocked. Zarin's head. Sooner or later he would begin to hate me and them. They fell silent. The pain of long ago decisions pulsed between them. "We were both right," Zarina said at last, "and both were wrong. Somewhere behind the wall the clock was ticking, an ordinary cheap clock that counts down the minutes of ordinary life, the one that Maxim once considered unworthy of himself." "There was a moment when I almost told you," Zarina said suddenly. "Artyom was 1 year old. He fell ill with pneumonia, heavily. Money was needed for medicines, from specialists." She did not look at Maxim, immersed in memories. "I called your London office." A secretary with an icy voice picked up the phone. "I introduced myself, asked you." Maxim turned pale. She said, "Mr. Belov has no children. He is engaged to Miss Catherine Holt. May I help you?" Zarina grinned bitterly. "I hung up the phone and sold the gold earrings." "Your birthday gift. I also had to pawn a laptop. It was barely enough." She remembered the gray-haired Tatar nurse who helped them in the hospital. She held Dina while Zarina was with Artyom. She gave me a strange amulet made of leather and beads. Irlar kilaham kita amasina, the old woman said, placing the amulet in Zarina's palm. What does this mean? Asked Maxim hoarsely. Men come and go, but you, mother, translated Zarina. That day I decided, I will never ask, I will never put children in a situation where their father has to choose between them and his new life. The doorbell made them both shudder. Zarina went to open it, and Maxim heard a woman's voice, familiar, dear, his mother. Elena Sergeyevna came in with packages of gifts and stopped when she saw her son. Maxim, are you here? Hello, Mom. He stood up, feeling like a little boy under her gaze. Elena Sergeyevna turned to Zarina and hugged her tightly. Forgive my son, she said quietly. He didn't understand much. She didn't want him to know. Zarina answered just as quietly. Pride did not allow me to ask. Search! Elena shook her head. Pride, bad pillow, my girl, hard, uncomfortable. But courage is a great power, and you showed it today. She took an old photo out of her purse and handed it to Zarina. This is Maxim's father. He died at 40 from a heart attack right at work. He left us with debts. Maxim was afraid to repeat his fate more than anything in the world. Zarina glanced at the photo and seemed to see Maxim. In 15 years. The same eyes, the same crease between the eyebrows. Now I understand, she said quietly, returning the picture. Helena left an hour later, leaving gifts and a promise to return tomorrow. To the children, she introduced herself as your grandmother, who... I missed you very much. Maxim helped to remove the dishes. His hands, accustomed to tablets and laptops, awkwardly coped with simple household chores. Late in the evening, Zarina stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching as Maxim carefully adjusted Dina's blanket, pulled a strand of hair from Artyom's forehead. I saw him blink a tear. Can a broken woman stick together? She thought, looking at the man she had once loved, more life, and the children who were the fruit of that love. Maxim turned around, met her gaze, and she saw in his eyes not my question. Zarina nodded slowly. Stay today. Is this your home? Dina pressed her nose against the car window, looking at the brick new building on Preobrazhenka. No, baby. Maxim smiled, looking in the rear-view mirror at the children. I rented this apartment yesterday. My real home is far away. In London? Artyom asked seriously, unfastening his seatbelt. Yes, in London. Maxim was silent for a moment, but home is not walls. These are people you love. Zarina silently went out, from the car helping the children with their small backpacks. A week had passed since the failed wedding, and every day was like walking through a minefield. She agreed to bring the children to Maxim, but she herself was wary, like a beast that has been burned many times and no longer trusts the outstretched hand. The apartment turned out to be spacious and bright. The nursery was already furnished. 2 beds with bright bedspreads, bookshelves, toys. Zarina noted everything to herself. New, but not flashy expensive. Maxim took into account her silent disapproval of ostentatious luxury. And who is this? Suddenly exclaimed Artyom, and at the same moment a golden retriever jumped out of the kitchen, happily wagging its tail. Byron, Maxim battered. On the dog's head. I brought it yesterday from London. I hope you will become friends. The children, with enthusiastic squeals, surrounded the dog, which instantly lay on its back, exposing its belly for scratching. Maxim met Zarina's eyes and saw wariness in them. I thought, he began. Don't buy their love, she said quietly, so that the children wouldn't hear. They're toys. Maxim. He nodded, accepting the reproach. I know, he replied quietly. But I really want to be a part of their lives, and my dog needs a family as much as I do. Something in his words touched her, but Zarina nodded curtly and turned away. The weekend flew by in an instant. Maxim taught Artem to ride a bicycle in the park, patiently ran beside him, holding the seats, cheering me up when it didn't work out, sincerely rejoicing at success. Dina sat on his shoulders, as if on a throne, and fed the ducks in the pond of Izmailovsky Park, laughing loudly when the birds staged a scuffle for bread. Zarina watched from the sidelines, sitting on a bench. She saw how Maxim was transforming next to the children. Disappears. Mask of a successful financier. A real living person appears, the one she once loved. Will you forgive him? Denise appeared as if out of nowhere, sitting down next to me. There was genuine interest in his eyes. I don't know, honestly, Zarina answered, not taking her eyes off the Trinity by the pond. He's been here for 3 weeks, and where has he been for 6 years? I didn't know. I didn't look for it. She cut it off. What if I hadn't come to the wedding then? Dennis said nothing. There was no answer to this question. He changed, he said at last. After your appearance, it was as if I woke up. For the first time in years, I see him as a living person, not a function. Zarina wanted to answer, but at that moment Dina noticed and waved her hand, shouting, Mom, come to us! We feed the ducks! And her heart trembled. In the evening, when the children were already asleep in their new room, hugging Byron, who somehow managed to climb up. Between them on the bed, Maxime went out on the balcony to answer the phone. Zarina wasn't going to eavesdrop, but there was a window, openly, and Maxime's voice sounded clearly. I will not return, Igor Vasilievich, he said calmly and firmly. And I will not give up this situation, as you put it. I have children. Pause. Zarina froze with a cup of tea in her hands. $1 billion. Maxim grinned without a trace of amusement. Contract with Emirates. Yes, I understand the scale. 3 years in Dubai? No. Another pause. Threaten as much as you want. Yes, I know that you can destroy my fund. Well, let it collapse. Everything can be built anew. But you can't bring back the time with children. Maxim turned off the phone and, turning around, saw Zarina in the doorway of the balcony. Their eyes met. Have you heard? He asked. Be quiet. Yes, she took a step towards him. You just gave up $1 billion. It's just money, he shook. Shoulders Maxim. And if you regret it in a year... There was bitterness in her voice. If you start hating us for taking away your brilliant career, my chance is here. He took her hands, and she did not pull away. With you, I have already lost 6 years fearing poverty, and as a result, I was impoverished in soul. Zarina gently released her hands. It's too much. A great sacrifice, Maxim, she shook her head. I'm afraid that sooner or later you'll start counting losses. She's gone, leaving him alone on the balcony. A few days later, Elena Sergeyevna visited them. She brought an old photo album and laid it out on the table when the children fell asleep. Look, she pointed to a worn picture of a man with tired eyes. Here's Maxim's father. He died at 40 from a heart attack right at work. He left us with debts and mortgages. Zarina peered at the features that so resembled Maxim. My son was afraid to repeat the fate of his father all his life, Elena Sergeyevna continued quietly. I was afraid to die poor and useless to anyone. This pain drove him forward, forced him to break ties, to reject love. I understand, Zarina replied, touching the photo. Fear is a cruel driver. Now he finally understood. Poverty is not in the wallet, but in the soul. Elena Sergeyevna closed the album. Give him a chance, Zarina. He deserved the opportunity to correct the mistake. Zarina did not sleep that night. Memories, fears, hopes clashed in her soul waves in a storm. She thought about how easy she and Maxim had been before, like two parts of one whole. I thought about 6 years of loneliness, about children who had already begun to become attached to their father. In the morning, she took decision. Having gone to the Russian Railways website, I bought tickets to Kazan for the next date for myself and my children. When she was closing her laptop, Artyom stood at the door of his room, silently watching her. Good morning, kid. Zarina smiled, trying to hide it. Awkwardness. Are we leaving? The son asked bluntly. Yes, to Golneri's grandmother. Zarina stood up and walked over to him. You're Miss. Will Dad go? There was anxiety in his eyes, which should not be experienced by a 5-year-old child. No, he has. Business, she replied, adjusting the collar of his pajamas. Will he forget us? Artyom asked quietly. How then? I did not find an answer. She hugged her son, hugged him, struggling with a lump in her throat. That same evening, my grandmother called, as if. I felt after hundreds of kilometers that my granddaughter was going to run. Kzim! Gulnara's voice sounded soft but insistent. You will. You run from happiness. Abi, I'm just afraid of pain, Zarina objected. Give him a chance, Kizim. And myself too. Life is rare. Offers us a second attempt. Zarina looked out the window at the evening Moscow, at the lights blooming everywhere like hope. And if he leaves again, then you'll know that you've done your best, the old woman replied wisely. And yours. Children will know this too. After talking to her grandmother, Zarina sat for a long time, looking at the tickets on the phone screen. Tomorrow, Kazansky railway station train. To the past, where everything was simple and clear. At the same time, a call rang in Maxim's office. She's leaving, said Denis. Tomorrow to Kazan, perhaps forever. Maxim froze, clutching the phone. My heart skipped a beat, then pounded with a vengeance. "Are you sure?" he asked hoarsely. "Absolutely. Tickets for tomorrow. Morning train?" Maxim looked at his watch. 9 p.m. He had less than 12 hours left to avoid losing his family. Again, the morning turned out to be cloudy. The gray dawn was barely breaking through. Through the clouds, Zarina closed the last suitcase. Her movements were clear, calibrated like a soldier's. Going on a hike, she had learned to gather herself in this way over the years, quickly, without wasting time on doubts. Dina was sitting on the edge of the sofa, sleepy, with loose hair. She was holding a teddy bear in her hands, a gift from Maxim. Small fingers tugged at the velvet ear of the toy. "Mom," she asked quietly, "are we going to take Byron with us?" Zarina on. She froze for a moment. "No, baby. Byron will stay with Dad. And Dad knows that we are leaving." Artyom was standing in the doorway with a backpack on his shoulders. Serious beyond his years. Zarina turned away, pretending to check the contents of the bag. "No, I didn't tell him. But lying is bad. Just," Dina said, looking at her mother with wide eyes. "You said it yourself, but you hit harder from the child's mouth. Any reproach—" Zarina crouched down in front of her daughter, removing the unruly strand from her face. "Sometimes adult center. Wrong, thinking it's better," she said quietly. "This does not mean that I am right." Artyom came up and put his hand on the shoulder, a childish gesture of support that pierced her to the core. "Let's call Dad," he suggested. Zarina shook her head. "It's too late. The taxi is waiting." The Kazan railway station was buzzing like a beehive. The flow of people spread through the halls, mixed, dispersed. Announcements about. The arrival and departure of trains created a sound cacophony. Artyom walked next to Zarina, looking intently in front of her. His small dinosaur backpack bounced to the beat of his steps. Dina held her mother's hand, pressing the plush to her chest. "Bear!" The Moscow-Kazan express train departs in 10 minutes from the first platform. The passengers' request to take their seats came from the speakers. Zarina helped the children climb into the car. The conductor handed over the suitcases. Their seats were by the window, 2 downstairs, 1 above. Artyom immediately clung to the glass, looking at the perron. Dina settled down next to her, thoughtfully examining the bustling people. "It will be fun in Kazan," Zarina smiled stiffly, laying out her things. "Grandma Gulnara will cook ekpakmak. We take you to Sabanchi." She talked and talked, trying to fill the strange emptiness that had settled in the compartment. Maxim jumped out of the taxi, dragging his travel bag behind him. Byron, a golden retriever, ran beside him, jingling. "Collar! Animals are not allowed!" shouted the guard at the entrance to the station. "I need to stop the train. Maxim doesn't even." Slowed his pace. He ran through the waiting room, pushing people aside. There was something in his face, despair, determination, mad hope that made the crowd part. The man and the dog rushed to the turnstiles. "Stop!" another guard shouted, but Maxim was already jumping over the fence, dragging Byron with him. The electronic scoreboard showed Moscow-Kazan, 1 platform, departure in 5 minutes. Maxim rushed down the stairs, jumping over the steps. My heart was pounding somewhere in my throat. There was a noise of blood in his ears, if only I had time. Just not to lose them again. "Mom! Dad!" Suddenly Artyom shouted, jumping on the seat. "Mom, there! Daddy!" Zarina turned sharply to the window. Maxim ran along the platform, pushing people aside. Byron raced beside him, knocking down someone's suitcase. She froze, unable to look away. He stopped right in front of their window, breathing heavily. Sweat streamed down his face. The expensive jacket was unbuttoned and crumpled. She had never seen the impeccable Maxim Belov in such a state. He was shouting something, but through the closed window and the noise of the station, it was impossible to make out the words. "Open the window." Dina tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mom, open it!" Zarina did not move. Years of resentment, fear, loneliness. Everything shackled her, turned her into stone. "Look," Artyom said quietly, pressing against the glass. "He is crying. He doesn't want to let us go." And indeed, tears flowed down Maxim's face. He pressed his palms against the glass as if trying to reach them through the barrier. The memory covered Zarina. Wave. The roofs of the university dormitory. The starry sky over Moscow. She and Maxim are so young, so carefree. "Promise to wait," he says, squeezing her hands in his. Eyes are shining. Reflection of the stars. "I promise," she's smiling. "But you also promise to return. Always return to me. I swear," he kisses her fingers. Even if they have to run across the world, they laugh because it seems impossible that someday they will have to part, that the oath will be tested by life. And now, 6 years later, he held back his promise, ran across his world to return. Before departure, the conductor's voice was heard for 1 minute. Request those seeing them off to leave the car. The train shuddered. The train slowly moved away. Zarina saw despair on her face. Maxim! He ran along the carriage, keeping his eyes fixed on the window where the children were pressed against the glass. Byron was running beside him. Laya. The Pyron was running out, but Maxim did not give up. At the last moment, when the train was already gaining momentum, he did something. Mad jumped up and grabbed the rails of the last car. He pulled himself up, threw his leg over the footrest. Dad! Aryam shouted, pointing his finger at the window. Byron remained on the platform, whining and running along the tracks. The guard shouted something after the departing train. Zarina could not believe your eyes. My heart was pounding like crazy. She looked into the corridor of the carriage, expecting and fearing at the same time. A few minutes later, the compartment door slid aside with a crash. Maxim stood on the threshold, disheveled, out of breath, with the mad eyes of a man who had just risked his life. Zarina, Artyom, and Dina looked at him, not believing his eyes. Promised, he gasped, holding onto the doorframe to keep from falling. I'll be back, even in. Zarina felt tears come to her eyes. He remembered. All this time, he remembered their oath on the roof. Dad! Artyom jumped up from his seat. You jumped in like a real superhero. And what about Byron? Dina was worried, holding the bear cub to her chest. Denise will take it. Maxim sank into the seat, still breathing heavily. I wrote before landing. A conductor appeared in the doorway, a strict middle-aged woman. Your ticket, please. She looked at Maxim with a suspicious look. He doesn't have a ticket, Zarina said, rising. Please issue proof. She took Maxim's passport out of her purse. He had been lying there since, in the morning, as if she knew it was going to happen. Maxim looked at her inquiringly. You left him on. Nightstand yesterday when I came, she explained. The conductor went to issue a ticket. Maxim knelt down in front of the Artyom. I promised you not to leave, remember? He said quietly. And I will keep my word. Real dads don't leave, the boy said seriously, looking into his eyes. They always come back. Maxim hugged his son, not hiding his tears. When the children, tired of excitement, dozed off with the measured clatter of the wheels, Zarina and Maxim was left alone in the cramped space of the compartment. I promise nothing but this trip, she said quietly, looking at the scenery outside the window. Nikah of oaths, only a chance to get to know each other anew. For their sake, this is enough, he replied gratefully. More than me. Deserve. He handed her a folded sheet of paper. Zarina unfolded it. Contract waiver agreement with the Emirates, signed the day before. I chose you, Maxim said simply. Forever. At night, when everyone fell asleep, Artyom suddenly opened his eyes and whispered, We are now a real family. Zarina stroked his head. Maybe, baby, maybe. When the train stopped in Nizhny Novgorod, we went out to the platform to breathe. It was past midnight, but the station lived its own life. The stars hung low above the horizon, bright as diamonds. I missed your laughter, said Maxim, standing next to the Zarina at the edge of the platform. And I am because of your honesty, she replied, looking at the stars. I love you, he said suddenly. Always loved. Zarina turned away, but he could see the moisture in her eyes. Don't tell me it's too early. The bell rang, announcing the departure. They returned to the compartment where the children were sleeping peacefully. The train raced eastward, taking them all into a new life. And for the first time in a long years, Zarina allowed herself a smile, looking at Maxim sleeping next to the children. Maybe this time everything will be real. The sun rose over Kazan, painting the ancient walls of the Kremlin in a delicate pink color. The taxi stopped at a small house on the outskirts of the city, an old wooden building with elaborately carved architraves and carved porch, shimmering with the sweat of time. An elderly woman in a traditional Tatar headscarf was standing on the porch. Dry, his face, speckled with wrinkles, bore traces of his former beauty, and his eyes, the same Mendel-shaped eyes as those that had been recognizable. They looked tenaciously and wisely. Abiyam. Dina was the first to jump out of the taxi and rush to her grandmother. Gulnara hugged her granddaughter, but her gaze was fixed on the tall man who stood awkwardly at the gate. She nodded for Rinya and asked quietly in Tatar, Singshuni, Saigan, Irmikan, is this the one you loved? Yes, just, Zarina answered. It's him. Gulnara looked at Maxim with an appraising glance from expensive, albeit crumpled, shoes to disheveled hair. I saw something in his eyes because I nodded and spoke with unexpected warmth. Kyrios oiga, tea exerbis. And then she translated for Maxim, come into the house, let's drink tea, at the table set. Traditional treats, shpakmaks, chak-chak, borsaks, the conversation did not go well. Children ate with appetite, treats, and the adults exchanged cautious phrases as if testing the waters. Finally, Gulnara put it aside, embroidery, which I was holding in my hands, and asked Naprimek, looking into Maxim's eyes, why he left my granddaughter. Zarina shuddered at the directness of the question, but Maxim withstood the gaze of the old woman. He was young, ambitious, stupid, he replied. Honestly, I thought that success was the most important thing, that money would bring happiness. Gulnara nodded, as if she had expected this. Response, and now? She asked, pouring him tea from a pot-bellied teapot. Now they know that I was wrong. Maxim looked at the children carelessly playing on the carpet. I'm only afraid that it's too much. I understood too late. Gulnara turned her gaze to her granddaughter. It's up to you to decide, not to me, not to him. Your heart must speak. Zarina, she said nothing, but something flickered in her eyes as she looked at Maxim showing Artyom how to fold. A paper airplane. Maxim settled in the guest room, a tiny annex with a narrow window overlooking the garden. First, in the morning he woke up at 6 to strange sounds, measured blows coming from the yard. Looking out of the window, he saw a Gulnara chopping wood for a summer stove. Despite her age, her movements were precise and economical. A minute later, he was already in the yard, taking the axe from the hands of the surprised woman. Let me help. From then on, his day began after dark. He chopped wood, repaired a rickety fence, dug beds for vegetables. Hands, never. Those who did not know physical labor were covered with calluses. Bryony's white shirt was left hanging in the closet. It was replaced by a simple t-shirt bought at the market. Gulnara watched him silently, nodding only occasionally when he performed the task correctly. Zarina, too. I looked furtively out of the kitchen window when I thought that no one was looking. On the third day of their stay in Kazan, celebration of Sabantui, the ancient Tatar holiday of the plow, the whole village poured out rivers on the boughs. Music was playing. Children ran around with ribbons. Men were preparing for competitions. Dad, look! Artyom pointed to the circle where the national wrestling karaj began. There are uncles fighting. Let's go and see. Maxim took, son by the hand. Will you participate? Asked an elderly Tatar who was laying out belts for wrestlers. The prize is good, sheep. Before Maxim could refuse, Artyom shouted, Yes, my dad is the strongest. And Maxim, of course, could not, to disappoint my son. He stepped out into the circle, tying a belt around his waist. His opponent turned out to be a stocky farmer with weathered face and hands that looked like oak roots. The struggle did not last long. Maxim found himself on the ground to the friendly laughter of the audience. But when he got up, shaking himself off and laughing, Artyom looked at. Shining eyes. Dad was the strongest, he proudly told Dean as he ran up. And at that moment, Maxim realized. The real victory is in the sparkle of children's eyes, in their unconditional admiration, in the fact that for them he is a hero, even a loser. In the evening, when the sun sank below the horizon, a fire was lit in Gulnara's garden. Neighbors gathered around someone. I brought an accordion. Tatar songs poured out, drawling, touching the soul. Unexpectedly for everyone, Zarina began to sing Enisa, an old song about love that waits patiently. Her clear voice soared over the garden, over the roofs, making Maxim's heart shudder with tenderness and pain. He looked at her through the flames of the fire, and it seemed that for the first time in many years he felt at home. Later, when most of the guests had left, and the children fell asleep in the house, Gulnara sat down next to Zarina on a bench by the fence. He's changed, said the old woman, nodding in the direction of Maxim, who was removing the dishes from the table. I see in his eyes. It's easy to change for a week or two, Zarina objected. And then? And this is your job to choose every day. Each other again, Gulnara wisely remarked. Late in the evening, when everyone had already gone to bed, Maxim was sitting on the porch, looking at the stars. Gulnara sat down silently next to her. Are you rich? She asked without preamble. He was. Maxim answered honestly. The fund collapsed as Lauren had warned. Maxim thought for a moment, then shook his head. No. For the first time in my life, no. Gulnara nodded approvingly. Then I'm ready. Pai bulu janel keshi bulu avir, and translated. It is easy to become rich, but it is difficult to become a man. One morning Zarina did not find Maxim in the house. Gulnara smiled mysteriously and nodded towards the far corner of the garden. There, among the old apple trees, I saw him on his knees with a shovel in his hands, planting a young tree. "What are you doing?" she asked, coming closer. Maxim raised his head, wiped his dog with the back of his hand. "Do you remember our dream of an apple orchard?" He asked where the children were. "They run barefoot and pick apples right from the branches. I decided to start implementing it. Even if you don't forgive me, the children will pick apples here." Zarina looked at his hands tanned with calluses and scratches. These hands are used to holding an expensive pen and signing multi-million-dollar contracts. And now they planted an apple tree for their children. Unexpectedly for herself, she sank down next to him on the grass. "You know," she said, "be quiet. I wasn't afraid of your betrayal all these years. I was afraid of my weakness, that I would believe you again. And you. You'll leave." "I'm not leaving." He looked her straight in the eyes. "Even if you kick me out, I'll live in a tent in front of the house. I'll come every day to see them, to see you." "And what about money?" "Career." There was no reproach in her voice, only desire. "Understand. London was a cage," Maxim replied, returning to planting the tree. "Golden, but with a cage. Money was a drug that required larger and larger doses. Do you know my main achievement in life? When Artyom first called me dad, not uncle, dad. They did not notice how two children's children were hiding behind the currant bushes. Figures. Artyom and Dina, without agreeing, decided to follow their parents. "They're making up," Dina whispered, her eyes wide. "Shh." Artyom put his finger to his lips. Zarina helped Maxim tamp the earth around the seedling, their hands sometimes. Touched, and she did not pull away hers. "Do you know what's the worst thing?" She suddenly said, "I still love you, despite being 6 years old, despite the pain, and that's what scares me the most." Maxim froze, afraid to scare off the moment. "Can I be afraid with you?" he asked cautiously, holding out his hand to her. Zarina looked at the dirty palm and suddenly laughed through her tears. "Can." Their kiss was salty with tears and sweet with hope, the first kiss in 6 long years. Uncertain, timid, as if they were learning the language anew. A muffled squeak was heard from behind the currant bushes. Dina could not stand it anymore and jumped out of hiding. Artyom followed her. They rushed to their parents and they opened. Hugs, letting them into your circle. "Are we a real family now?" asked Dina, shifting her gaze from her mother to her father. "Maxim and..." Zarina looked at each other and answered with one voice, "Yes." The September sun flooded the spacious kitchen of the new apartment. On Kutuzovsky Prospect, Byron, lounging at ease on the rug by the balcony door, lazily watched. Hosts. Maxim in homemade shorts and a t-shirt was conjuring at the stove, turning pancakes, a recipe that he had been taught. Gulnara, Artyom, standing on a stool, solemnly broke eggs for an omelet, sometimes missing the bowl. Dina, singing. A Tatar song, which she learned from her grandmother, she arranged plates, neatly laying out napkins. Zarina entered the kitchen, hugged Maxim from behind, resting her chin on his shoulder. "Good morning, millionaire." He laughed, turning. To her, an ex-millionaire, now just happy. After returning from Kazan, their lives turned upside down. Maxim opened a small consulting firm in Moscow, often working remotely to be closer to family. Zarina received a contract for translation of a series of American novels. They rented a spacious 3-room apartment, not luxurious, but cozy and bright. Byron, whom Denis brought from overexposure, became a full-fledged member of the family, despite the habit of chewing. Slippers. On the weekend, Elena Sergeevna came to them. She brought an old photo album, but now it has new pages. Their group photo in Gulnara's apple orchard, pictures from a trip to the zoo, shots from the first day, the birth of twins, which they celebrated together. "It's time to create new memories," she said, hugging her grandchildren. "We have a whole life ahead of us." Victoria's visit was unexpected. She rang the doorbell on Friday night as the family watched. Cartoon. Zarina tensed when she saw Maxim's ex-fiancée on the threshold, but Victoria only smiled and held out. "A bottle of wine. World? I won't be for long." While the children were playing in their room, Victoria said that she married an archaeologist whom she met at excavations in Turkey. "Father is furious," she laughed, shaking her glass. "He says, she changed the billionaire for a person who digs in the ground, and I'm happy." When she was leaving, she lingered on the threshold and said to Maxim, "Thank you for not marrying me." We would both be miserable, and Zarina whispered, "Take care of him. He knows how to love." Simply forgot about it for a while. That evening, they were walking in Sokolniki. Autumn gilded the foliage, and Dina collected the most beautiful leaves for herbarium. Artyom tried to fly a kite, which he made with his father. Maxim fled, nearby, helping to hold the rope. "I wouldn't have appreciated it all so much if I hadn't been wrong 6 years ago," he said when they were. Zarina sat down on the bench, watching the children. She kissed him on the cheek. "You won't wake up. This is reality." The spring of 2020 turned out to be early and warm. On Navruz, on March 21st, the whole family came to Gulnar's Kazan. The apple trees in the garden are covered with a delicate pink color, and the one that I planted. Maxim gave buds for the first time last summer, a small miracle that no one believed in. The children ran barefoot for more. Cool Earth, as Zarina once dreamed, played hide-and-seek among the trees, collected fallen petals, chased after. Byron, who found new adventures in the garden. In the evening, when the children fell asleep, Agulnara and Elena Sergeevna enthusiastically. Discussing recipes in the kitchen, Maxim took Zarina to the same apple tree that he had planted almost a year ago. Having descended to one knee, he took a small box out of his pocket. It contained a simple emerald ring, not pretentious but elegant. "I don't deserve you," he said, looking up from below. "I'm 6 years late, but let me spend the other 60 years with you." Zarina laughed through her tears. "Get up, fool!" The wedding was held there, under the blossoming apple trees. A simple ritual of nikah was performed by Gulnara, blessing the newlyweds according to ancient Tatar customs. Elena Sergeevna stood nearby, happy for her son. Denis, who flew in from Moscow, was a witness. Artyom proudly carried the rings on a small pillow. Adina, in a wreath of apple blossoms, scattered petals in front of the young. Even Byron took part in the ceremony, catching the falling petals with his tongue. "I swear, never choose. Money instead of love. Success instead of family," Maxim said, putting the ring on Zarina's finger. "I swear. Trust, even when scared. To believe in us, even when it is difficult," she replied. Denis took a photo. The whole family is under a blossoming apple tree. Gulnara and Lena are nearby. Maxim hugs Zarina. Twins, laughing in the foreground. Byron peeks out from behind the host's legs. A photo that they will hang at home and keep for the rest of their lives. Epilogue. 10 years later. October 2029 turned out to be especially beautiful. Gulnar's apple orchard, which had grown significantly over the years, was blazing with gold and bogryanka. Artyom, a tall 16-year-old boy who looked so much like his father, helped collect apples in large baskets. Dine turned into a real beauty with her mother's eyes. She laid out treats on the table for a family picnic. 5-year-old Rustam, named after Zarina's grandfather, ran between the trees, trying to catch the last butterflies. Season. Gulnara, slightly aged but still shrewd, sat in an armchair under an apple tree watching the great-grandchildren. Elena played chikord with the younger children, surprisingly dexterous for her age. Maxim helped Zarina. "Spread a blanket." The years had added gray hair to his temples, but his eyes shone with the same warmth that she had loved for 17 years. "Back! Dad!" Artyom approached his father, wiping his hands from his jeans. "Do you ever regret losing your billions?" Maxim looked around the garden, the children, the woman who became the center of his universe. "You know, son," he replied with, "Smile. I lost money, but I found the meaning." Zarina hugged her husband by the shoulders. "Do you remember how you dreamed of an apple orchard?" "I remember," Maxim nodded. "Dreams come true, just sometimes in a roundabout way." They watched their children run between. Apple trees, the very ones they dreamed of 17 years ago, sitting on a blanket on the Sparrow Hills, young and in love. The sun slowly sank below the horizon, painting the sky over Kazan pink and gold. The air was filled with the delicate smell of apples and autumn leaves. The sonorous laughter of children resounded throughout the garden, merging with the rustle. Leaves. Rustam ran up to his parents with a huge red apple. "Look what you found!" They bit it together. Juicy, sweet, with a slight sourness. Like their life itself. Happiness through pain, through mistakes and forgiveness. Real wealth that cannot be measured in money. Dear friends, have you been touched by the story of Maxim and Zarina? Would you be able to forgive the person who once betrayed your trust but returned with sincere remorse? And what would you do if you were Zarina? They would have risked reopening. Heart, or would you prefer to leave the past in the past? Share your opinion in the comments in this story with your friends. If the story touched the strings of your soul, like and subscribe to our channel where other exciting stories that you see on the screen now. M.